Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 7th session of the Industry Leaders Talk series, hosted by New York Institute of Technology's College of Engineering and Computing Sciences. My name is Jane Palizzi. I'm Assistant Dean of the college, and I'm here on behalf of Dr. Babak Beheshti, Dean. This series is co-hosted by our college, as well as IEEE Region 1. Today's panel discussion is also sponsored by the IEEE Long Island Computer Society, Technology and Engineering Management Society, and the IEEE Women in Engineering Affinity Group. Our audience today is comprised of IEEE professionals as well as student members from across the Northeastern United States, in addition to the College of Engineering's current students and alumni, and a number of distinguished guests. I would like to thank the College of Engineering's Dean's Executive Advisory Board, particularly its chair, Dr. Robert DeFazio, who has been instrumental in organizing this series. Please note that this talk will be recorded, and the recording link will be made available to you in a follow-up communication along with a survey. Today's industry leader panel discussion is titled Launching Your Career, Advice from Doers, Makers, and Innovators of the Future. Today's panel moderator is Dr. Michael Nizick, Director of New York Tech's Entrepreneurship and Technology Innovation Center, also known as the ETIC. Our esteemed panelists are Michael Lantier, PE, Lead AP, Assistant Vice President, Senior Discipline Engineer at H2M Architects and Engineers. Mitch Maymon, President, Intelligent Product Solutions, and Barbara Porter, Chief Operating Officer, Fragrance.com. Please review the panelists' biosketch available on the event website. If you have any questions, please add them to the chat, the Q&A feature. Without any further ado, I will pass it on to Dr. Nizick.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Mike Nizick here from New York Tech, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here moderating this panel of just amazing people. So to our panelists, to Mike, Mitch, and Barbara, thank you so much for being here today and helping to give some advice to our students, maybe even some folks who are transitioning from the workforce into other areas. But your advice today and your comments today, based on your levels of success, is going to be just an amazing contribution to helping them get their first start. Today we're talking about launching your career, advice from doers, makers, and innovators of the future. And the three panels today are going to exemplify what that means to be a doer, maker, and an innovator, right? To actually create, to actually go out there, make a difference, look at problems that are challenging us as a society, plaguing us as a community, and actually performing the actions that are going to make those changes and make those solutions available to solve the problems. Three folks you're going to talk to and hear from today, listen very carefully. I know them all very well personally. And again, I can't use the word amazing enough, but you're in for a treat. All right. The way this panel is going to work is basically we're going to have a 45-minute session with a 15-minute Q&A. So you'll have some time to actually put into our Q&A section in the webinar any questions you might have. We're going to look at them and look at any kind of dupes or anything like that, but we're going to be able to ask those questions to the panelists. We have a series of questions that we're going to ask the panelists that are based on topics that we know that you're going to have interest in. And then we're going to wrap up the session towards the end of that. So what I want to do, so we get an idea of not just our panelists' names and their companies and organizations, but we want to hear a little bit about a day in the life of each of our panelists, so you know why you're listening to them, right? And it's going to be very cool to hear kind of a day in the life of each person. So I'm going to start kind of on my screen here with how we're doing this, but I'm going to start with Mike Lantier. Mike, from H2M's perspective, could you give us just an idea of your role and what you do there? Give us a couple of minutes to give us a background on yourself.
Thank you very much, Michael. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly. Thank you very much for the College of Engineering for having me present. It really is a pleasure to be here and to be able to provide some insight, because a lot of the questions that we're going through today are questions that I really wish that I had some of the answers to as I was finishing up my college career as well. So to make a long story short, I am an electrical and computer engineer by degree from NYIT. I did work full time as I was finishing with school. Graciously, I was able to find a company that would allow me to continue my education while working. Currently, I've been with my firm H2M for a little bit more than 15 years, and I've been a partner with the firm for about 7 years. I started with H2M as an electrical engineer in their mechanical electrical plumbing department, and through my many years of experience, I now have gained a leading role managing a specific market that H2M is involved in, and that's the education market. So most of my time is spent working with K through 12 school districts throughout the tri-state area, as well as higher education and private or charter schools. I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of New York, and I am United States Green Building Council LEED accredited. I do also reside on a number of boards, a couple of which are college electrical engineering board of directors, as well as a couple non-for-profits, Habitat for Humanity. I try to give back as much as I can with any time that I do have available. I think that is kind of an important way, not so much to round out your career, but kind of just to round out your life in general, always to try to give back. I understand that time is not always easy, but it's important to me. I also have rounded out my education with an MBA in finance. Thank you, Michael.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Mike. So next on my screen, Barbara Porter, the Chief Operating Officer of FragranceNet.com. Barbara, would you mind giving us a background, maybe a day in the life of the COO?
Sure, there we go.
There
Hi,
she is.
everybody.
Hey.
Sorry about that.
No.
So I graduated from New York Tech back in 2000 with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, but I had been working in industry for a decade before that. So this was a career change for me. I had worked initially in entry-level jobs in accounting and slowly moved myself into lower management, but getting that degree really took my career in a new direction. Since then, I've also gone on to earn an MBA in management, and I'm currently working on a master's in cybersecurity. In my day-to-day role here at FragranceNet, up until 6 months ago, I was the Chief Technology Officer, and I've held that role for over a decade. I was now made Chief Operating Officer, so I oversee both the IT department and the operations teams, which includes multiple warehouse facilities and is now almost 500 people large. So never thought I'd be overseeing that many people, but it's quite interesting and can also be quite rewarding. I'm also involved in various professional organizations, including IEEE, as well as the Project Management Institute and ListNet, which is a local organization that helps promote local businesses that are involved in technology in some way and help them work together and help them thrive here on Long Island. We've got a great set of resources with local colleges, feeding a lot of technology people to companies, and we want to keep that growing here on Long Island. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Great. Thank you so much, Barbara, and looking forward to hearing from you as well on the questions. And last but not least, of course, Mitch Maymon from IPS. Mitch?
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be invited to speak on this panel. My name is Mitch Maymon. I'm the president, CEO, and co-founder of Intelligent Product Solutions, better known as IPS. IPS is in a different domain from my other associates here. We're in the business of developing products for a variety of clients. We have a large team of engineers with diverse backgrounds. We have electrical engineering folks, we have mechanical engineering folks, we have embedded systems people. That typically comes out of the electrical engineering, or may come out of the computer engineering worlds there at NYIT. And then we have people at the software at the application level who might come out of the comp sci side of NYIT. And we have another functional group in our company called designers, industrial designers, who do both hardware and software user interface and user experience work. As I said, I co-founded the company with my partner. It's going on 14 years. I guess January will be 14 years. And you can think of us as, I'm an engineer. My background is engineering. I have my undergraduate degree from Hofstra University locally. I got a graduate degree in mechanical engineering from Columbia University, and followed on not long after with an MBA from Fairleigh Dickinson. I've probably spent half my years in the profession as a card carrying engineer. The other half has been a manager of engineers. What we do now, and what may be of interest to you is, in my earlier years prior to forming IPS, I was a manager or an executive of groups of engineers developing products inside of companies. Now, that's all we do. We're an engineering company, a design and engineering company, and we do work for other clients. So we do work for people like Steinway, Google, Parker Hannifin, Becton Dickinson in the medical space, a whole raft of other clients. And I've always found the career to be very rewarding. I think the engineering degree can take you many, many different directions. I think, Barbara and Mike have taken their degrees into different areas. And I'll provide a different perspective on where I've gone, but it's a great stepping stone into lots of different things one can do. And as Mike mentioned, when I was an undergraduate, I really had next to no idea about what an engineer does when they got out. And I know it's a very challenging program, and hopefully, through this session, you'll have a really good idea of, why it's worth the struggle and pain to pursue a degree in engineering or comp sci. I think that's about it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mitch. We are now approaching our section for our panelist questions. The way we'll work this is I will pose the question. Each panelist will get up to 2-3 minutes to give their answers and the background to their answers and the reasoning. And then we will move, I will kind of move through the questions as we go through. So these questions are geared around, again, of course, the topic of the day, but mostly for our students who are, finishing up their degrees one way or another, undergrad or graduate, and getting ready to make the transition, right? Getting ready to move into industry. So our answers from our panels today are going to be geared around personal experiences, things that they've gone through, things that they've gone through with new hires, things that they see in their own employees. So that will be the context. So again, I urge you as our attendees and our students to listen very carefully to the panel. They have a lot to offer. So we're going to get going. And I'd like to point out, for a bunch of engineers, we're right on time, 1 o'clock. We're going to start the questions. So of course we would be, right? We could not be. All right, so our first question for our panels. Many students are concerned with what happens after graduation. To most, this is a highly stressful time for them. And one of the reasons is that they do not know what the next step is for them. Can you each, from your own unique perspectives, let our audience know what they should expect next as they enter the workforce? So what's going to be kind of the step-by-step process they go through now as they begin to make this transition into the workforce? On my screen, I have Mitch. You want to head out first, Mitch?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so thank you. I think the process really starts while you're still in school, and I think this is really a very valuable step that not all students take advantage of, and that is to look at the on-campus recruiting activities that may be going on at NYIT. Get a broad perspective of the different kinds of companies there are that are out there looking to hire engineering talent. And look at folks in all different industries, and you'll get some even broader perspective than the three of us can provide in terms of just how broad the range of opportunities are in the field. I'll say, coming on board to any company, it varies widely in terms of what the experience is like onboarding. I've been in big companies as an early stage or entry-level engineer. I've been in small companies. The process can be quite different. Oftentimes, very large companies, will have very structured programs for onboarding and mentoring and guiding. Smaller companies may not have as much structure, but good companies of any size will all, take charge that when you bring on somebody right out of school, you're taking on not just somebody who's going to contribute to the overall good of the organization, but you're also taking on a responsibility to help with the continued development of that staff member. So, mentorship is really important. I know in our company, when new people come on board, they get thrown pretty much into some really challenging work, but they're not alone. They've got mentors, they've got more senior people to work with, and expect that in the early years of your career, you're going to be drinking from a fire hose in terms of the way you're learning. But I would also suggest you keep in mind you're always going to be learning. I've been at this longer than almost anybody I know that's still in the game. And I can tell you, I still continue to learn every week. I learn something new. So it's a never-ending learning process, and a place like NYIT is a great stepping stone to set you up in a position to be able to continue to learn and contribute to your company and society.
That was great, Mitch. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have on my screen next, Barbara. What should they expect and as they enter the workforce? What's from your perspective?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I was already in the workforce when I graduated, but I did completely change careers once I got my degree. So I can relate to this question a bit. What I experienced and what I've witnessed in the many years since is that there, as a new entry, a new hire coming right out of school, there's not a large expectation that you're going to be able to be up and running 100%, the moment you start your professional career, but there is an expectation that you are eager to get yourself to be a full contributor to the role. So in my experience, people who show determination in these early phases can stand out from the rest, and they may find growth opportunities are presented to them as a result. Mitch mentioned, an important thing, about big companies versus small companies. In big companies, your role that you first land may be very narrow and well-defined, whereas in small companies, you may get exposed to a much larger role. You're responsible for more things, or you're exposed to more things, and those environments sometimes can create a larger growth opportunity for you. So something to consider, as you enter, your first role. Are you looking for something more structured, or are you willing to kind of go with things and see where it plays out?
That's actually a really interesting point about the two different types of jobs, right? One can take them one place and one can take them another. That's interesting. So, Mike, what do you think? What should they expect as they enter the workforce?
So it's a great concern, a great question. It's easily understood that this is a common concern. Unfortunately, the question is also very dynamic. You had two great responses from Barbara and Mitch. I agree that it really does start before you do graduate and you do start looking for your first job, if possible. When you're a freshman and you're a sophomore or junior in college, it's really important to try to start out at an internship or working part-time in a related field to what your degree is. From personal experience, when I enrolled in the electrical engineering classes, I knew I wasn't going to get a job probably at an engineering firm, but I ended up working for an electrical contractor because it was something that was obtainable, and it was something that would give me some sort of experience. During the interview process, if you're unable to have that internship, obviously the interview process, as long as your internship goes well and you're successful, the interview process is probably significantly easier. If you are, going into cold interviews, not having familiarity with the inner workings of a firm, just be as professional as possible. I hate to say it, but that does mean, wear a suit. Make sure that you dress appropriately for the interview, and make sure that you're prepared. It's so important to come understanding whatever you can find out about that company that you're interviewing with, and bring questions. There's nothing better than interviewing a candidate that has clearly has interest in your company and has actually thought through kind of what might be involved in the project. And the way to do that is by really asking, specific questions about the company. If it is a virtual interview, I would recommend just practice using the software if you're not familiar with it. Daily at this point, many people in the workforce are having remote calls and conferences across many different platforms. But if you can ahead of time, try to use that platform to try to become familiar with it. What I will suggest too, when you do finally start that first job, you should expect to work hard. It's kind of the way that it goes, and that's kind of how you prove yourself and you move up through an organization. Training is typically provided by an organization, but the level of training varies dependent upon the company and depending on what processes they have in place as well. But beyond the training, try to be as proactive as possible. Go that extra mile, try to stand out, and that's something for each individual to determine really what that means. In my case, it was, working extra hours, coming in a little bit earlier, staying a little bit later, joining committees when the opportunity presented itself. In my case, that committee was actually a company softball team. One of the options that came up was to lead the company softball initiative, and you know what? It was a little bit of extra work, but it got my name out there. I had visibility, and the best part about it was I got to meet people throughout the organization that I wouldn't have had access to if it wasn't some kind of event like that. Never stop learning. And make sure that you always try to stay organized as possible. Like Mitch mentioned, it's like trying to drink out of a fire hose when you first start. Just try to at the end of each day or the end of each week, just try to recap and make notes of kind of what you learned. Make sure you take note specifically of the important items so you can go back at some point and regurgitate what you learned. Last thing is just understand when you start a new job that it does take a lot of time and it does take a lot of money for a company to train and onboard a new employee. So, be respectful of that and try to return that to the organization as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's so interesting you said that about knowing the company they're interviewing for. We stress that so much here with the students at E-Tech. If you're going for an interview, try to know the company almost better than the person interviewing you, right? Know as much as you can about that. So it's nice to hear that. As a quick follow-up question, not so much from our prepared questions, but how important is for our students, because we're a technical, program, right? A lot of our programs are engineering programs. How important is it to have, technology portfolio, right? To show some of the work you've done. Can you each comment a little bit quickly on that, Barbara?
Yeah, sure. I will say definitely for the software development roles on, the IT team, we're looking at your GitHub. We want to see what you've built over time, and it's fine if it's, school projects, but we want to see progression. We want to see, taking on some more advanced things there. So definitely that's very helpful. I will say it's funny, several years back, we had interviewed somebody for a job, and he was right out of school, and he just really didn't have anything, too advanced to show us, and we didn't feel he was ready. And he went and for the next year volunteered for his local fire department, writing software to help them manage whatever they needed to manage, in the fire department. And he came back and interviewed with us a year later and had learned a lot of new things. He was able to, demonstrate that he had advanced his skills, and we hired him. I think that showed great tenacity and his willingness to continue to learn. So to Mike's point, never stop learning.
Yeah, that's a great point, a great story too, right? Great story. Mitch, what do you think about technology portfolio?
Yeah, so I think in my company, there's a really diversity of people coming in different disciplines, and the norms can vary a bit. I'll say among the designers, the industrial design folks on my team, it's very much the norm to have a portfolio that these days, most of the time, that's online. It tends to deal a lot with the aesthetics and having examples is really important in that world. The next step along, I think it's relevant to what Barbara was saying. Those that are involved in software typically, might have things that are demonstrable that they can share or have some form of portfolio of things they've done. But moving down the spectrum, I'll say to sort of the electrical engineering and the mechanical engineering folks, they typically don't have what I would classically call a portfolio. But I would suggest this: never denigrate any work experience you have. You could learn, you learn something from everything. Never be afraid to talk about your work experience, even if it's got nothing to do with engineering, you can learn from anything and anywhere. And I'll just recount my own personal experience. I come from a family where nobody was an engineer. I don't think anybody in my family even knew what an engineer was. My family was small business people. They had pharmacy in Brooklyn, Maymon's Pharmacy. And I learned something from there that I didn't even know, but that led to IPS and led to, for me personally, it was a learning, was that I always knew felt I had a destiny at some point to start my own business. And I never knew what it was until 15 years ago when we decided, let's go start IPS. I'll say other than that, though, there's any place you work, you learn something, and try to make a connection between anything you've learned in a work experience, whether you were working in a drugstore or Walmart, or if you had even a great internship, or if you had, there's always something you can learn. And I would say, recounting the student projects you've worked on is a little bit insufficient, because when I interview students, I don't interview too many these days, but I'm assuming it's the same. When we interview students in mechanical engineering from NYIT, they're all pretty much on similar projects. The important thing is not the project. The important thing is, what did I learn from it? What role did I take on the project? Try to generate something that's personal about you to communicate to the interviewer that takes it out of the commodity state of, I worked on this project to make a robotic wheelchair. Well, that's great because 20 students all worked on that. But what did you what's special about your role? What's special about what you learned from there? And don't be apologetic about it. Be proud of it. Take ownership of it and use it to your advantage.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Mitch. Mike, what do you think on technology portfolio? Was the question?
So it's a great great point that you bring up, Mitch. And in my line of work, I didn't get into it too much in the beginning, but H2M is a multidisciplined architectural and engineering consulting firm. So what a lot of our work really comes down to is that communication aspect. It's not so much about what you did, but it's your ability to talk us through your experiences prior to that interview. It's not necessary to have a portfolio with what I do. We understand that a lot of what you learn is going to be on the job, and we have that expectation that you've gained that experience just going through that degree process of understanding the theoretical, or understanding what it takes to solve complex problems. But with that said, it does stand out. I mean, I can think in my mind, probably a dozen people that I've interviewed over the years that had interesting portfolios, or even if it was explaining, or something that they can use to explain what they did during their senior project. It absolutely helped the interview process.
Great. Thank you so much for answering that follow-up questions. For our next panel question, we have many students that are getting ready to enter the workforce are concerned that they will not like what they're doing as a job in the beginning. Can you provide some insight in this, Karen? And additionally, can you tell us what do you love about your job now? Right. So these students getting ready to work into the workforce, what if I don't like what I do in the beginning? Right. What can we tell them? Mike, let's start with you. I'm going to reverse my screen. I'll start with you this time, Mike.
Sure. I guess I'm glad that I'm the first person that gets to go on this topic. I have to give it a little bit of tough love here. For me, I understood that I was most likely not going to love my first job. There's a lot of things that affect how much you really like that first job. A lot of it's out of your control. It has to do with the economy. It has to do with unemployment rates. It has to do with you actually really knowing what you love. Many people go through their entire lives looking for that job that they are going to love. I mean, there's a reason, right, why they call it work. You need to gain that experience, whether you really like it or not, and somewhere along the way, you'll figure out what you like, and then you strive to find that perfect position. And the way that you do that is by networking and talking to people that you think are in that position, to see if it's something that absolutely does interest you. So what I will say, kind of what about what I do like and what I do love about my job is that I'm involved with every aspect of planning and construction for many different markets. So my work is very dynamic. There are aspects that I love about what I do, but there's still many, many things that I don't like about what I do. And that's just inherent to any job. It's not easy. It's not always stress-free. But that's part of having that job and having that career. If it was easy, then everyone would go for an engineering degree. What I really like the most about what I do is seeing that finished project. An example, we just completed an award-winning project for a school district upstate, assisting with a almost a $12 million safety and security project that included all of the newest technologies to help monitor and protect students and to confirm access to the site, as well as many different other security protocols. And that's really what makes it worth it. At some points during your job, there are things that you complete or you see done, or you're able to help a client that really, really makes your job, worth doing. In a nutshell, that the love is the love is different. It's different every day, and it's the complex issues that I really love dealing with.
That's great. Thanks, Mike. So to my left, Mitch, what can we tell students about their first job, and and also what do you like best about what you do?
Thank you. Yes. I'll tell you about my experience. It as my first jobs, and I'll tell you about what I enjoy now. So I don't necessarily recommend what I had done. When I graduated from school, like many of you, I had a pretty vague notion of, what is a day in the life of an engineer. And my first 5 years working, I had 3 different jobs. I was never let go. But after about a year, I would say, this is either A, boring, or B, not interesting to me, or I didn't like the culture. And I will say, and this I think my peers would agree with me on, you have to own your career. And I wasn't smart enough to know that at 22 years old or 21 years old. I guess I must have intuitively known it. I had to own my career, and I just wasn't happy. And I sort of packed up and left to go to other jobs, in the field, but in just different capacities. So I had been involved in project engineering, plant equipment. I'd been in manufacturing engineering. I had been in, design of some very simple products. I'd been in process engineering, all of these with a mechanical engineering degree. And they were all very different work. And I was, frankly, after 5 years, I was pretty discouraged that, after 5 years in 4 different industries, I don't like any of this, and I then was fortunate enough to, get a job working for a company on the island here that was at the time called ADS, Applied Digital Data Systems, in the early 80s. And I went to work for a person who was a prior boss of mine, who hired me in, and it was in product development of technology-oriented products at the sort of the dawn of the personal computing industry and the time when computing technology went from being in the hands of a very small number of people to being in the hands of the masses. And I loved the work. I loved the technology. I loved the interaction with people in other disciplines. I loved being in a company that was relatively early stage, fast moving in a new industry, being on the forefront in discovery. And I found that was something I enjoyed. And that totally changed my mind about the career after that point and transformed things. So from that point, I did have 2 other jobs. I was at, and I loved my job at ADS until such time as, there were some management changes after a takeover, and the culture flipped overnight. And I no longer felt like I was enjoying it as much. I still loved the work, but I couldn't take all the things that were going on around the work. So I decided time to leave. I went to work again on Long Island for a company called Norton Systems. It was a company doing systems for anti-submarine warfare I worked on as a mechanical engineer. I loved the work. But then, when the Reagan era ended and the spending in government was going down, I said, this ship is sinking. And I left, and I went to probably was the most rewarding job other than IPS, was a company called Symbol Technologies, which today you probably may know of as Zebra Technologies out in Holtzville. and I loved it. It was an early stage company, not very different from my time at AS. The culture was phenomenal. They invested a lot in being able to learn. It was really a great place for a quirky person like me. So culturally, I fit right in, and it was a great experience. And I went from the point of being an engineer to an engineering manager to a director to an executive, and I enjoyed that. Now I started, after leaving Symbol. My partner and I decided to start IPS. He was a co-worker of mine I'd worked with for a number of years. And I love what I'm doing. It's entrepreneurial. That was in my DNA from being very young. But I love, what I love technology-wise is we work with not just, big giant companies, but we work with a lot of early stage companies that are either in incubators or just come out of incubators. And I just love, I don't do hands-on engineering work anymore, which I always enjoyed. But what I love now is I get to see the world 5 years from now. We're working on projects in technology, things we're doing with Becton Dickinson that are, probably going to change the lives of diabetics, at least in the developed world, where they could afford the technology. They're going to change the lives of people. And being able to see what's coming in a few years, to me, satisfies a lot of curiosity for me. And even as a manager, and I think Mike and Barbara can agree, you can get pleasure vicariously out of the success of your team. I don't do the hands-on work. I don't get on a CAD system. I don't calculate anything, but I have my team does it, and I love just seeing the result and being around the result of what they do. And at this point in my life, that's what keeps me going and keeps me in the game. Is this is my adrenaline rush. So that's my story.
You got me excited, Mitch. How do I get a job? I'm kidding. It sounds great. It sounds great.
We're growing.
So Barbara, we're on, expect what the students can expect the first time, and then also, what do you like best about what you do?
Yeah, so as far as students being concerned that they may not like their first job, I'd say that's a very legitimate possibility, and it doesn't mean that all hope is lost. I realized, fairly early on, even before I graduated, honestly, that I didn't want to be writing code for the next 40 years, and I began to explore other options. I worked hard. I tried to stand out, and also tried to find ways to provide value to my boss. Maybe take over some tasks from him. I like what Mike mentioned about, organizing the sports team. Those kind of opportunities can really allow you to create bonds that you may not have made if you stayed at your desk. So definitely look for those type of opportunities. With my boss, over time it became easy for him to promote me to manage a team of software developers, because I kind of already been apprenticing for that role for him for a while. Over time, I sought out more information about project management concepts, and around that time is also when I decided to go and get my MBA. By the time I graduated with that degree, I was managing multiple software development teams and had been elevated to director. I continued to learn. I learned about Agile and Six Sigma and anything I thought that would make me more effective at my role or give me new opportunities. And eventually I became a CTO and now a COO. As far as what I love about my job, it's really the same thing that I loved about computer science when I was pursuing my degree. My job is all about how to make things work and make them work well. But now, instead of tinkering with programs to make them work, I'm tinkering with business. I'm making hiring decisions, allocating funding for projects, overseeing data analysis to drive good decision-making on the various activities the company's involved in. Sometimes this involves technology, but often it doesn't. Every day is different, and I'm always weighing the pros versus the cons of a decision, and also evaluating past success and failures in my decision-making, so hopefully I can do better next time. All of this also becomes inputs to decisions I make as I plan for the future. So even today as a C-level executive, it's critically important that I keep learning from textbooks, from newspapers, from the world around me, and even from my own decisions and their outcome.
That's amazing, Barbara. Thank you. It sounds like another great experience at all three of your organizations. Thank you so much. So this next question is an important one on students' minds. And it's all about the discussion about handling questions about compensation and benefits and what's the real value and is one better than the other, and just a whole bunch of confusion usually when they're going for their first job about what to ask, what to expect. So the question is, many students are concerned or even confused about how to handle interview questions about salary, benefits, and work locations, especially post-COVID. We have all these different options on work locations. Can you let us know your thoughts on how students should handle these types of questions as job candidates entering the workforce for the first time, right? What should be their answer? How should they approach it? What's a good way to do it? What's expected of them? What might be a mistake and cause them to have a poor interview? So it looks like I'll go with Barbara this time. It's like Hollywood Squares. I'll go with Barbara this time. If you can comment on that, that'd be great.
Sure. I would say don't be scared to ask questions. Of course, candidates should want to understand what their salary and benefits will look like, but I would say you shouldn't bring up those questions until they've asked you about you and your background, and you've asked questions about the work you'll be doing and the environment you'll be working in. It's a little bit, like a dance. The interviewer will make sure you've got the qualifications. You should ask questions to learn, more about what you'll need in order to make your decision whether you want to work there or not. When you do come to ask these questions that are not specifically related to the role, but are more related to the job, the company, the package, things like that, make the questions meaningful, particularly if you want the role. You should ask questions first about how is the team structured? What does the workday look like for a typical person in this role? How is the company handling remote or hybrid work? What are the expectations of a person in that role? Those show the interviewer that you've been thoughtful and you care about the role that you're going to take. You're not just going to take any role that has the highest salary. You actually have thought about what you would like in a role, and you want to see if they're a fit for you. And I think a little bit of that, is fine. You don't want to play 20 questions and ask, when there's free food and, things like that. As long as they're meaningful questions, I think they're fine. After that, then you can ask about a typical salary range for the role and what the benefits are. It's not unreasonable to want to know those answers, and the hiring managers do expect those questions.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. Mitch, you want to go on this one? Basically about salary and benefits and in that domain.
Yeah, I agree with Barbara. It's the questions about comp and benefits and things like the work schedule, the days of the week. I tend to kick that can down the road as far as you can. Keep the focus more about understanding the job, showing interest in the job. And I'm going to give you the perspective you as a student, as a future employee, or as a future engineer need to know is you're going to own your career and you want to always be in the decision-making part of picking where you want to work. So try to avoid things like that, which would play a card too early. It's better for you to be sitting talking to 3 different companies and have them want you, and now ask the questions about comp and benefits and work things, and you make the decision for yourself about what you want, rather than take the chance of the person who's interviewing you make a judgment about you and never get to that point. You're not always going to be taking the job that may be the highest salary. There's lots of reasons why you might take a job. These days, even pre-COVID, the world of engineering, at least from what I've seen, is changing in terms of the work week. It was, in my early days, it was a normally 5 days a week, whatever number of hours a day, and that was the norm everywhere. But the world, from the companies I have been at in the pre-IPS, and even among my clients, I get a window into a lot of companies. Lots of them have had flexible work schedules before COVID. There's companies a lot in, Mike may see this in some of the companies he deals with, where they've gone to like what they call a 980 schedule, where you work whatever number of hours, you work your 2 weeks worth of 80 hours over 9 working days, and you have every other Friday off. I've seen companies with half-day Fridays. I've seen companies with Fridays off and a 4-day work week pre-COVID. COVID's changed the dynamics quite a bit. There's really not norms anymore. I think Mike and Barbara will agree with me. I mean, if I look across my client base now, and even within our own company, there's no two companies that have a norm anymore. And so, you know, if you're interviewing today, you walk in and the policy may be X, but 2 months later, it may be Y is the norm. I mean, even inside my own company now, if you ask, you know, what is the work policy? Well, right now the policy is, you know, we recommend you come into the work or office 3 days a week. You can work home the other days, but like all bets are off in terms of anything beyond the next 30 days. Because if COVID spikes, we're going to change it. And if COVID gets, you know, less, we may change it again. Will the world go back to what it was? I don't know. I think it's probably going to be something else. It was going there anyway. So those are valid questions. I tried to say, you know, kick them down the road a little bit further so that you can be in the, you know, as they say, the catbird seat, making the decision about, you know, well, I really like company A. Now let me see what they're offering and then make a weighted decision. And you will get answers to questions like, as Barbara pointed out, you will get answers to questions around compensation and benefits and you know, I would try not to drill down too far on any one particular benefit. The general way to ask the question is, hey, can you tell me, you know, when you get to that point in the process, can you tell me about your benefit package? And let that person expand on it that way, rather than saying, hey, tell me about your medical and health insurance policy, and do they cover this medication? Well, that may be a very relevant question in your mind, but you're not going to want to drill down that deep in the interview process. So
Good advice. Thank you so much, Mitch.
mhm.
Mike, what do you think?
So that really was great advice that Barbara and Mitch gave. There's probably not too much more that I can add to it. I could probably reiterate a little bit more. Like Barbara said, you know, don't be afraid to ask. There's no reason to, you know, hold back when you need to know some of this information. It's nothing to stress over. Everyone gets to that point at some point during the interview and the hiring process. But you don't need to jump right into it, especially if it is, you know, your first job, you know, or you're very early on in your career. Like Mitch said, you know, you can kick it down the road a little bit. My feeling on that one is that if you're making more of a lateral transition between jobs, you may want to discuss, you know, your direct salary or your direct compensation sooner rather than later, just so, you know, you're not wasting anyone's time. You know, if you're looking for, you know, $100,000 position and they're really looking to hire someone for $40,000, real quick, you know that's not going to align. But again, that's not something you'd have to worry about for your first position. Before you really get into those discussions, you should really have an idea that you want to work for that company. Before you even get into those, there's no use in spending the time to discuss those specifics unless it's a company that you really feel like you could see yourself working for. So salary is a little bit more difficult, you know, to hone in on, but the benefits and your remote working is a pretty easy discussion because it's standard for most employees across a business. You know, to get into them, just so if there are people on the call that don't understand kind of what you should somewhat be seeing in the market, is, you know, typical benefits are, you know, a 401k match. A company should be matching a certain percentage of what you're saving for your retirement. They should be able to provide you health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance. There should be some paid time off that varies somewhat between different companies and the size of the companies. Some added benefits, which we're seeing now, are, you know, additional bonus time or additional bonus on top of your standard salary, flex time, like Barbara mentioned, free food. So you never know what you know, companies are, you know, really promoting to hire themselves. You can discuss the remote expectations. Again, if you want to work for the company, then it really shouldn't matter unless you have a specific need. At some point, the remote or the telecommuting will come up. to try to determine, what a fair salary is and what your worth is. That's a very difficult, decision. It progresses along with your career. And it's hard to determine sometimes what that value is. You can look on things like salary.com, you could look on Glassdoor, you can look sometimes on LinkedIn, you can search different profiles for different open job positions, and they may post salary, but that is more of a different topic. Try to talk to people that are in that position as well. Try to speak candidly with people that have the experience, if you're able to try to get an idea of what the salary range is for a specific company and a specific position. Thanks, Michael.
That's great, Mike. So thank you all three for the answer to that question, and to really for all your input on all the questions so far. So one of the ones that I wanted to kind of hit on is is how important are the skills, experiences, and academic records when applying to an entry-level job? And I of course, from our perspective, looked at the academic records for an entry-level job, right? So how, if they're panicky or they're worried about that, how important is that versus maybe some other attributes that they might be able to show?
I mean, I will say, when I've been in a business of hiring entry-level people, you're dealing with a lot of resumes. And the unfortunate truth is, you can't interview everybody. You can't interview 200 people. You just can't do it. It's for an individual position. So you need some screening criteria, and oftentimes grades are part of that. It's the unfortunate truth, but it's not the only thing. And I'll say, once you've got the interview, the grades can sort of drop back a little bit if you can talk more about what you've done. I hired an intern a number of years ago, probably 15 years ago, and I still mentor this person. And they were a Stony Brook student, and I would say at best they were maybe in the middle of the class. He was a mechanical engineering student, and he was the exception that sort of proves the rule, that you really got to probe deep. So, he didn't even apply to an internship. He came walking up to the office in sandals, shorts, and a t-shirt, and said, "What do you guys do around here?" This was a little gig I had in between IPS and Symbol. And I said, "Well, this guy is odd enough that I want to talk to him." So it was audacious, I suppose, in a way. And he came in and he started talking. He has resume. He was maybe it was a 2.7, 2.8 GPA, not great. It's Stony Brook, not bad. But he had such a passion. And he said, "Mitch, I got to show you some of my ideas." And he opened up one of those, composition notebooks, cover to cover, page after page. He had ideas for products that he wanted to go develop someday. And I said, "This is a special person." I hired him on the spot, because I said, I just got to know more about this guy. He's got quite a mind going there. It was obviously from him. But I said the point of that story is you don't have to have the best grades. Once you've got the interview, you can talk about the context for that. And I've had lots of people have lots of reasons, when I listened to what it was they were interested in doing, how they spent their free time, maybe the part-time job they had, maybe they were, and maybe as Mike had described earlier, maybe they were working and going to school at the same time. That's interesting to me, right? And that is, the academics is half of it. The other part's the character of the person, because you're bringing in somebody with both. And so I try to get a balanced picture. And by the way, I've had, grade point 4.0 students from MIT that have, come in and interviewed, and I wouldn't hire them. If the school paid me their salary, I wouldn't hire them, because the character side was highly flawed, right? So again, it's not the only thing. So try not to stress over it too much. And if you're not in the in the elite range of academic achievement, just make sure you have a good story to tell around what it is who you are, what's your character, what do you do, what's your passion, and that will go a long way.
I'm
Thank
sure that was great, and I'm sure it was a big relief to a lot of students that are, kind of ready to enter the workforce.
Everybody's
Thank
at
you.
the top of the class.
Thank
right?
you.
So-
Barbara, you want to comment on that?
Sure. I'm with Mitch that grade point average tends to be something that I look at. But I also have never in 20 plus years of hiring technology folks, have I ever asked for a copy of a transcript. So it almost doesn't matter what is there. It's nice to see it. I think if the grade point average is too high, then I do worry, this is somebody who's done well. Is it somebody who's just naturally gifted and everything comes easy for them and they're not going to work hard? Or is this somebody who works really, really hard to make sure they achieve that top grade point average? So that's something that can almost be a red flag for me. And I want to learn a little bit more about that person, to Mitch's point, kind of what drives that person, what's their character, what matters to them, to understand more about that. I'd much rather have somebody who had a 2.7 and is willing to work really hard to try and improve themselves and learn what they can and contribute than somebody who got a 4.0 and thinks, I got this. This is easy, no problem. This is all, nobody's going to go into a role where they know everything and they're done and then they can just coast from there. You should perpetually be learning, and you have to go into any role with that attitude.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Barbara. I'm happy that this is in line with many of the things that we tell our students as we go as well. So, and they're going to feel a lot better about this. This is great. So, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not too much more I can add to that. I completely agree. Even in my line, being a consulting firm, we would rely less on that grade point average and more so on the ability to communicate and the ability to work hard. It's about having that grit. It's about, just showing your worth.
So we are approaching our stop time, but there is one more question I want to put forth because it has to do with a program that is emerging here slowly but surely at New York Tech that is going to be available to students one day. And the question that came out, which is a great question, thank you for posting it, is, what do companies feel the value of going through a co-op program is, where a student would spend 6 to 8 months of full-time work for the company, right? So, again, because this is kind of going through a program that we're putting together, from a company's perspective, what does a company value, from a co-op program? Mike, I'll go with you because you just finished up.
Sure. Yep. I'll take that one to start. So with my firm, I mean, we highly value programs like that. H2M is a little under a 500 employee company spread out across, I believe, 9 offices right now. And every summer we have a very intensive internship program where on average we hire about 50 interns that will come to us for the summer alone, and we value it for a number of ways. One, it gives us the opportunity to see a larger group of potential future employees, but it also gives the employees the ability to find out about our company. So we're not spending a long-term relationship for someone that may not be interested with the company. So I absolutely highly recommend any kind of co-op that you're able to get involved with. And I feel like many companies should really embrace that, especially with the tight labor market that we have right now for engineering students.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, we've also had interns for many years that come to us, over the summers. But the co-op thing is not something that we've implemented here, and I'd like to, learn more about that. I know in a prior company they did have a co-op program, and I even know somebody who actually a former roommate of mine when I was first in college. She co-opted her way all the way through. And she would be 1 semester on campus and 1 semester with the company. And I just know that was a great opportunity for her to help pay for her education. But it also, she got to see the company over a series of years and learn if that was a right fit for her. And they also got to see her and see if she was a good fit for them. And the answer, thankfully, for both was yes. But I think for a variety of reasons, it's a win-win-win across the board.
Great. Mitch, what do you think
Um,
on the co-op program?
the co-op program, I think the benefits, we also, as with Barbara and Mike's company, we hire a lot of interns too. And the interns are really the pipeline for the most part, for 80% of our entry-level positions are internships. They just sort of move from, classically, they might be start working in the summer. They might continue in the next semester or the next year of school, working part-time during the year, maybe full-time during intersession periods. And then, more often than not, they get through that point and they're proving their worth, because by that time, they're probably already doing useful, productive things for us. It's a pretty easy path into becoming a direct employee. I would say co-ops are good from a standpoint. It's a good question, because as with any work experience, having a co-op experience where you've worked can be a value. Anything you learn on any job, go back to that principle, is a value. At IPS, would I bring in somebody from a co-op? I'm not quite sure, because co-op programs, as some of them I've seen, they tend to not necessarily have co-op experiences at the same company. And that's sort of, if that's the way it works in a particular institution, it kind of goes against the pipeline, theory we have for internships. So basically, I'm going to be very selfish as an employer. When we have an intern and they're doing really well and I got our hooks on them, I want to keep my hooks on that person, so that like when comes May of, it's the last semester of the senior year, they're not out looking for another job. They're already coming to us and I don't have to compete for them. So, I mean, I know that sounds kind of selfish, but as Mike said, it's a war out there for talent. And in the co-op, I may not have the same hooks into the person who was an intern, but I would say it's still good in the sense that you get work experience, and that work experience can be valuable.
That's great. Thank you all so much. So we are at our official stop time. I just wanted to, as the moderator, thank Mike Lantier of H2M, Mitch Maymon of IPS, and Barbara Porter, of course, from FragranceNet.com. Having great panelists makes my job so much easier. So I want to thank you so much. And thank you for IEEE, our sponsor, for hosting this event, along with College of Engineering and Computing Sciences. I've been Mike Nizick from New York Tech, and your moderator, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists and our moderator, for a great discussion today. Thank you all for participating in this event. My thanks go to colleagues who made this event happen: Dr. Rob DeFazio, Ms. Carmen Marmo-Savignetti, Ms. Nadia Aslam, and Ms. Jill Rogers. Please tune in for the next talk, as it will be advertised through the same channels where you learned about this talk. Have a terrific afternoon. Thank you.